just building those successes on top of each other. And all of a sudden you're just confident in your ability to figure it out because you've done it before. It doesn't matter what the topic is, right? So my biggest tip is you need to set the example. You need to make it okay. You need to ask questions. You need to be a little vulnerable. And then everybody else will be like, oh, well, yeah, like that's how we work.
I love that.
The secrets are getting shared today after all. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
What excellent stories. I'm just sitting here enjoying this. I feel like we're at like a fireside chat. It's been fantastic.
Awesome.
But I am curious to get more into your path as well of management. So why did you want to be a manager in the first place? What sort of led to that?
So this was 2004. So I started working for a company called Tomax. They're based out of Salt Lake City. And they're mid-sized firm at the time, 200 people. I'd come to them out of consulting for several years. Oh my gosh, consulting is so much fun. You get to bounce around and get exposed to tons of different industries and companies. And anyway, but I came out of that and landed at Tomax, and I was on a small team doing Oracle, Oracle Forms, Oracle Applications Development. We were a team of 5, and my manager left. And I'd come in as tech lead at that time. And so the obvious thing to do was like, well, hey, Liz, just watch over the team and we'll figure it out, right? Like we'll get a manager, but for now it's your gig. And I was like, oh, I don't know I don't know anything about this. And I like, again, kind of that panic, like are they crazy? I'm going to fail. This is going to be awful. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I was made for this. I love this. Why didn't I do this forever ago? Are you kidding me? This is awesome. And so that's kind of how I fell into management. To be fair, that was also the point in my career where a lot of folks that I had been working with over the years, like they were starting to make that divide. Like, are we going to go kind of the senior staff IC track, or are we going to switch over to management? So like, there's chatter and talk, and you see what people are doing and thinking. And so like it piqued my interest, but I was like, heck no, I was in database administration. I was Java programming, and I loved all of it. So I was like, no, I'm going deep. I'm really good at this and I'm loving it. But like my interest had been piqued. So then when it landed on me and I was kind of fighting and wrestling with it, but then fell into it, like, I'm like, no, the people management and the project management and the direction, I was just like, no, this is me. I absolutely love this. So that's how I got started. And then fun fact, Tomax got acquired by Demandware, and Demandware got acquired by Salesforce. So
okay, so that's how okay, so well, all right, so it was obviously something you enjoyed, but then how did you, because when I was looking at I was stalking you on LinkedIn. I do with all of our guests, I know.
You should. Okay, that's why it's there.
But, yes. But I noticed like you really went quite quickly from consultant right up to management. So there are, I think one of the most asked questions we have on the podcast is, how do I go from junior to mid to senior? How do I go up the ladder? And you seem to do that pretty quickly, even though it was an interest for you. What are some things you felt like you did or that you would suggest to other people for how they can also get into management positions or go from junior up to senior, things like that?
I have a whole Medium post on this, actually. I talk about this and think about this a lot. And I love working with people on this. One of the first things you have to do is kind of just figure out, why do you want to do it? And the reason that's important is because, like we've been talking about, you're gonna hit some stumbling blocks. You're gonna bump into things, and you've got to decide, like, are these obstacles to be overcome? Or are they going to be a point where you just reevaluate and check out and you're not really interested? Or are they going to make you bitter, right? Like, there's so much mind drama as you're pushing yourself to grow and advance. And if you don't come at that clean, then it's either going to stall you out or frustrate you or turn you off in a different direction. So like, that is my first thing, is really come to an understanding of why you want it. Because honestly, and I've fallen to this myself, a lot of times we want it to feel better about ourselves and our abilities. And like, we put the burden of recognition of that on other people. And I'm like, no, that's not a great way to do it. Like once you recognize your talent and everything, then it tends to shine and people are like, yeah, let's go. I want you on my team or you in that position or in that role. And so it's, some people say it's counterintuitive, but I'm like, no, it's absolutely a requirement. You have to figure out why you want to do this, because that's going to be how you project yourself in everything that you do. So get clean first. The other thing I talk about is, right, like you need to figure out what your path is, especially as you're getting into these more senior levels. Like, don't look so much outside of you for answers. Start figuring out your answers and your path, because it's going to be different for everybody, right? So it's really important for you to look to yourself first and foremost. And because everybody's going to have opinions, right? Everybody's going to be like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. Like, maybe like you get to decide. That's the beauty of it. But that said, I definitely have some tactical tips. One thing I find really important, and I know people don't believe me when I say this, but I have proof. I am an introvert, right? I like to stay in my corner and just hide with a book, or like, that's me. In fact, somebody at work was just talking about how they were able to spend a weekend at a conference and it was so good to see all these people. And I'm like, no, that sounds awful. But the tip here is you need to build a network, like your way, right? You don't need to have 50,000 followers. You don't need to have 10,000 professional or 1,000 professional contacts, but you need to have your network that can serve different purposes, right? Like who is your advisors? Who are your confidants? Who are the people who will help sponsor you? Who are the people who have connections, right? Like you need to put yourself out there, and that can be really hard for people like me. So figure out a comfortable way to make that happen, but make that part of your strategy, because a lot of times it really is who you know. Like we like to not think about, nepotism in the workplace and bias. And we do actively fight it. Like we talk about it and I'm so pleased. But human nature is that you're gonna, work with the people that you know and trust and build a relationship with. So build relationships. And that's another key thing that I like to talk about is on that path, keep those relationships up. Like don't burn bridges. And a lot of times I think we do it accidentally. Maybe we don't intentionally burn them. I know sometimes I've intentionally burned some, like it's not great, but it happens, right? But think about it and do that intentionally and keep those conversations going with folks. Another thing that I get asked a lot is, okay, well, what language should I specialize in? Or what technology? Should I go into networking? Or should I go into Kubernetes? Or should I go, right? Like there's all these options. And I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like just pick one. I think once you get in, especially with programming, once you get into it and understand the programming constructs and everything, then great. Like now you have a solid foundation. You know how to solve problems. You know how to make an impact to a business. And then you can translate that to other languages. Technology, depending on how deep you get into one area, it's not that much different either, right? Like you can pick up those basic concepts of how do you roll out a project? How do you operate sustainably? How do you, and you pick these up as you go. So my advice is don't overthink it. Like pick something and go with it. But yeah, when you're looking to advance, choose your goals, build your network, set your targets, and then just commit and know that you're going to make it happen. And when one door closes, like say you go up for promotion or you go for that big job transfer or whatever it is, and it doesn't happen, like, yeah, process that emotion, but then realize like, okay, so that one wasn't going to work out for me. Can't wait to see which one will. It's out there. I'm going to find it.
Yeah, totally. Like it's gonna happen. Just be patient.
Yeah, it's not a race. I think that's a really big trap that we fall into. Like I want to make senior by the time I'm 27 or whatever it is. Like, okay, if that works for you, yes. If it motivates you, go for it. But if it starts in the
competitive, it's kind of hard to like separate anything from competition. I don't know, maybe it's society that drives us towards that.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's some healthy competition, but like we need to celebrate each other more.
That I was just going to say that I think going back to your point about building your network and having those confidants and people that you can really trust, that for me is one reason to build that, because when you have those, I don't even want to call them setbacks. They're just letdowns. I think, like you
Yeah,
get
totally fair.
excited about something and it doesn't happen, so you get let down. And if that happens time and time and time again, that can get hard emotionally. It can take a toll on your confidence. But when you have people who are rallying around you and just like, whatever, it's just, it just didn't work out, but that doesn't mean anything. It's not because you're not qualified. I think that helps a lot. So.
Yep. Yeah, I talk about 3 main areas that people need to focus on. Like, find your mentors, find your coaches, the folks who are going to like make space for you to grow and develop, not tell you how to do it. And then find your network, right? Like, find your peeps who you're going to call when it really gets rough and just let it go.
Who
Like,
are you
you
going
need
to call?
all of that. You need all of that.
Nice.
Thank you so much for sharing these tips. I want to move on to a little bit about the company you currently work for.
Yes.
A lot of developers hold GitHub in a very high regard, and we use it all the time. And a lot of developers, even like before we knew the name GitHub, we knew what Git was. And so can you tell me the difference, the sort of, just as for some folks who might not know, and even for me, I could use some clarification too. Like Git versus GitHub, what's the difference?
Yeah, so the big thing started. So by the way, this week is GitHub's 15th birthday from the very first commit that started. GitHub.
Happy birthday, Git.
Yeah, so like the origin story is a little fresh in our mind, right? So like it started with 2 guys who were using Git. Git is it's an open source code control tool, command line driven, right? That you can version and check out and all of that. And the 2 guys started like, we need a way to just be able to collaborate on this more, and right. So enter the concept of pull requests, and that's literally how it started, right? Is just getting a little more added to Git the open source code control. So inside GitHub now today, 15 years later, right? Obviously our bread and butter is source code control. And so we host Git with pull requests and now issues and pages. And now we're getting into actions and CI/CD and code spaces so that you can develop your code in the cloud online, and on and on and on, right? Like, and Copilot, Copilot's the next hot thing. Your AI virtual driven pairing partner who suggests code for you and will commit it for you. Like, it's amazing what has happened in 15 years. But yeah, the entire concept of Git and GitHub. Git is that core source code control. We actually do have core Git contributors employed by GitHub, right? So we feed back into that community still. And then GitHub lays on top of it all of the extra bonus around having your code managed by us.
Awesome. That was a great answer to that question.
So talk about, I don't know, maybe I'm like making this a bigger deal than it is. I don't know. When I think of GitHub though, I mean, I'm thinking of, this is the group of people who are like responsible for managing the repositories for some of the biggest companies across the world, right? And if you really sit and think about it, I mean, developers have heard of, like Erik was saying, we've heard of GitHub for a while. I think even if you don't use it at your company or for your personal uses, you at least know about it, right? So, but you're there at the company. You guys manage all of these repositories. So talk about like, what is it like being in that role where you are the director of engineering that, with the people who are really responsible for such important repositories?
So the first difference that I noticed when I came to work for GitHub Well, there were a couple things, and I'm trying to phrase this carefully because I loved working at Adobe, and I love